We'll come to our next item, which is discussion regarding the One Water Initiative, and I think Ms. Marjorie Craig is coming to enlighten us.
Hi, and I have some of my best friends here with me, too. And Brian and I are color coordinated, as Veronica mentioned. Marjorie Craig.
Got your A-team here, okay.
Yes, what is my title? Environmental Utilities Director. And some of this is going to be a repeat of what you've seen in August, so I'm going to buzz through that part. Bill told me I only had 7 minutes, so don't time me. So you can tell, as I told Councilman Trace, that an engineer put this together. It's very square and very beautiful because it's very symmetrical, and I'm sure Mary Emma could do something much better. But it's One Water Initiative, which is all water is important. It's all important. It's something that we need to value. Reuse is important. Stormwater is important. All of it's important. We've had no rate increases for water sewer reuse since January 2015. It's very important as we move forward that we implement many a suite of tools for demand management, for irrigation, and for all water conservation. So we talked about in August at our workshop the One Water Initiative, establishing reuse irrigation zones, and landscape irrigation efficiency initiative. And we were going to talk about the reuse rate recommendations, and I deferred that because Wendy was not here, our finance director, and I don't like to do rate presentations without having the finance director present. It's just not. I don't think that's a good thing to do. So what we'd like to do is do a presentation. We're just going to refresh on what we presented as far as our One Water Initiative, which is policy initiatives and also infrastructure initiatives to solve this problem or challenge, and then go right into the rate presentation. So with that, again, all water is valuable. It's important to develop a water conserving culture and to store surplus water during the wet season and augment reuse with stormwater and with any drop of water that we can. So again, it's Murphy's Law, and we can't always get the water where we need it and when we need it. We've had some challenges since 2007. During the rainy months, we have plenty of water, and we either store it or we inject it, and we have a deep injection well. And we are also working with Toho to store some of their reuse water during the rainy season because they have surplus water, and they may be able to even take off some of the edges. We may even be able to use some of that reuse water that they have when we don't have some, and then inject some of their water for them. So, and then our alternate water supplies, we just don't have enough of it in the dry season, so we're looking at storing additional water. And the projected reuse demand is going to, unless we change the way we're doing things, it'll continue to increase. So we came to you in August with the 2 critical approaches, policy initiatives and infrastructure initiatives. And with a list of policy initiatives, one of them is to increase reuse rates. Why? Because the price signal shows value. And then we talked about establishing reuse zones. We talked about the stormwater ponds, demands. We talked about grants. Y'all have been very supportive about that. And we talked about infrastructure initiatives to optimize our existing resources and extend reuse. So, and I won't go through all of that. You have the list. So I'll have Cameron run through just to mix it up a little bit. He's going to run through all the different reuse zones.
Good evening. Cameron Crandall, Deputy Director of Environmental Utilities. As Marjorie talked about, we presented this the first time in August, and one of our proposed policy initiatives would be establishing 4 irrigation zones. And this is based on existing conditions, and we brought in our engineering consultant, CHA. They looked at the hydraulic model just to make sure everything made sense. So here's the map of the utilities service boundary area. First one is the purple, that's the existing reuse zone. I'll go more into detail on these zones in a minute. The blue is the existing potable irrigation zone. The aqua color is the reuse limited to wastewater, and then the orange is the restricted potable zone. The potable irrigation zone, that's the blue. So this is the core of the city. This is some of the first development in the city. This is where they're using potable water for irrigation. Most of the time they're on a they have a separate irrigation meter, different rate structure, but obviously we want to reduce potable irrigation as much as possible because we want to save it for potable uses, not for irrigation. The second zone, that's the existing reuse irrigation zone, and this is the development when reuse first came into the picture in the 80s. This is where we were using as much reuse as possible. It was more getting rid of reuse water than using it constructively. So a lot of these areas were designed to use as much as possible. And of particular note, up in the Narcoossee area, there's areas that have reuse pipes, but they're charged with potable water. So they're actually irrigating with potable water, and this uses about 560,000 gallons a day. So this would be obviously something we want to change, get them on true reuse. 560,000 gallons a day that could supply 2,000 or 3,000 new homes for potable water. The reuse irrigation limited to wastewater produced. This zone, this is one of our new proposals, and we've been working with developers talking about this, and they've been pretty receptive to this idea. The whole idea is that they only get as much reuse as they produce wastewater. At the wastewater plant, we're turning wastewater into reuse water. It's extremely efficient. We're talking about 99%, 98%. So the idea was we would design, or the developers would design their subdivisions, their neighborhoods. They would know how much wastewater they're producing, and they would design their landscaping and irrigation around that number. We've talked to some of the bigger developers coming in, Center Lake, Edgewater, Tohoqua, and they're working with us on this. We've also talked to the UFIFIS and some landscape professionals trying to bring as many people in as possible to accomplish this. And then finally, there's the orange zone. That's the restricted potable zone. So there's our areas of our utility service boundary area where currently we just don't have the means to serve them with reuse water. So this would where we would allow limited potable water irrigation. So stuff like misters, drip irrigation, low water use types. We would encourage Florida-friendly ground cover, Bahia grass. We would manage their use of potable water through their landscape and irrigation plans. But obviously, we want to make sure we're using potable water for potable water uses.
So the last one, this is really what we're here to talk about mostly. The others were reviews from August. And this is the potable or the reuse rate, proposed reuse rate increase. So we have not had any reuse rate increase or any rate increase since 2015. We'd like to recommend that the council recommend a public hearing in February. And right now, our reuse rates are substantially lower than the potable irrigation rates, which does not send the message to conserve, which means that we don't value that water as a real as a valuable resource. So as we just talked about, reuse was originally effluent disposal. We were just trying to get rid of it anywhere. And so now it's a critical component of our water supply. We think that reuse is just about equally valuable as potable water for irrigation, and it's valuable, but it's available at a fraction of the potable price. So here are our existing rates, and we're not suggesting for for the potable irrigation, and then the reuse rate for the various meter sizes. You can see the difference there. And here are the existing potable irrigation rates versus reuse rates for use. So, and the various tiers. So you can see how much less the reuse rate is than the potable rate. That's quite a bit different. So even though you're not taking it from the stormwater pond, Mayor, it's still quite a value. So what we've done is we have a recommended reuse rate that we've increased it to. But what we have done, what we do know is that we do need to adjust this for our tiers. Our tiers, we have to get with Reptelis because our tiers are not quite right, because our higher tiers would cause quite a bit of a jump for people that have a master meter.